The original plan was for us to adopt PRRD for our vice presidential candidate. Pero sa mga nangyari noong nakaraang Sabado, nagbago lahat ng plano. Kaya't ngayon, nagkukonsulta kami, yung partido, at siyempre lahat ng mga ating mga ibang kasamahan na kung anong dapat gawin and what do we do now. And so that is where it is.
And you just heard presidential aspirant Bong Go Marcos disclosing that his team originally set their eyes on having President Duterte as his running mate in next year's elections.
The plan did not materialize after the president announced his retirement from politics, withdrawing his plan to run for vice president. And with Senator Bong Go running for VP instead, does that mean a Marcos-Go tandem might be in the works? Good evening, I'm Gretchen Ho.
And I'm Ed Lingao. You're watching The Big Story. Is a Bongbong Marcos and Bong Go tandem a possibility? Well, both parties are not discounting the likelihood of a team-up.
The former dictator's son also admitted that he did have talks with Davao City Mayor Sara Duterte. That, however, did not progress. Mayan Los Baños has the big story.
Bongbong Marcos already made his 2022 presidential bid official. But unlike other hopefuls for the top post, he came without a running mate. The late dictator's son bared it should have been President Duterte.
The original plan was for us to adopt PRRD for our vice presidential candidate. Pero sa mga nangyari noong nakaraang Sabado, nagbago lahat ng plano.
Last October 2, Duterte, PDP's original nominee for vice president, announced his supposed retirement from politics. Senator Bong Go made the filing in his stead. So is Marcos open to having a tandem with Go?
Paano yun? Bong, bong, bong. Bong to the third power. Baka pwede rin. We'll see.
The president's longtime aide seems to be open to the idea.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, walang pili naman po ang pagsiservisyo ko sa tao. Rerespetuhin ko po kung sino ang ihalal ng taong bayan.
Marcos also admitted that he and his sister Amy had discussed political plans with presidential daughter Sara Duterte Carpio during their visit to Davao City last May. It's just that talks did not prosper.
We talked about politics but no specifics. And since then, hindi na kami nag-usap sa specifics. Yung mga ganyang klaseng usapan, ikaw mag-presidente, ako mag-vice, ikaw mag-vice, ako mag-president. Wala kaming hindi na umabot yung usapan namin sa ganun.
As for a rematch with Vice President Leni Robredo, Marcos said he'll take on any presidential hopeful. Marcos had lost against Robredo in the VP race and his electoral protest thereafter. Senator Ping Lacson and Senate President Tito Soto also filed their COCs for the country's number 1 and number 2 offices. Their respective senatorial candidates followed suit, like Mig Subiri, Joel Villanueva, Herbert Bautista, and Monsur del Rosario. Reporting for News 5, Mayan Los Baños, we are One News.
With the 2022 elections heating up, certain questions arise from top post candidates, particularly Senator Bongbong Marcos and Senator Bong Go. And we have with us tonight political analyst Professor Jean Encinas Franco. Ma'am, magandang gabi and thank you for joining us.
Magandang gabi, Ed.
Yes, ma'am. Well, I suppose you heard yung sinabi ni Bongbong Marcos na ang una niyang napupusuan was President Duterte for his vice president. Any surprises there? Was that expected at all?
Of course, hindi na ako na sorpresa, no? It says a lot about the political closeness of the Dutertes and the Marcoses, no? And obviously, Bongbong was still banking on the popularity of President Duterte, no? And that's also the reason why he had to reiterate that during his filing earlier.
Pero ma'am, what do you think of the chances of kahit hindi si Pangulong Duterte mismo, kasi open naman si BBM kay Senator Bong Go, what are the chances of BBM linking up, if not with the President himself, but with the Bong Go of the PDP Laban?
Oo. Alam mo, historically, di ba, parating sa magkaibang koalisyon, no? I don't wanna call it a party, no? Ang presidente at saka ang vice president. So ibig sabihin, hindi masyado nakakaapekto sa chances ng president yung kukunin niyang vice president. So parang again, as to whether si Bongo o kung sino man ang pipiliin ni Marcos, hindi natin alam to what extent will it boost or not boost his candidacy. Kasi nga,
Yes, ma'am.
historically, hiwalay na binoboto ng mga Pinoy. Oo.
Yes, ma'am. Pero ma'am, yung numbers ni Senator Bongo are not particularly high. So
Yeah,
that raises the question na meron bang may advantage ba si Bongbong Marcos in getting Bongo? If not electorally, politically?
Yeah, oo nga. O kasi hindi pa lately lang naman din siya 'di ba hindi siya nag-appear nung when he was nominated to be the presidential candidate, and lately lang nagpalit sila ni Pangulong Duterte. So let us see, no? Let us see.
Okay. Ma'am, huling pahabol na lang, malaking question mark pa rin si Ginang Sara Duterte kung saan siya patungo. It's ready, we're entering Thursday, tomorrow, the second to last day before the end of the filing of the COCs. Any fearless predictions? Or I don't know if you want to call it that.
Oo nga eh. Oo. But I'm not really sure, no? But the fact that the family, Duterte, Sara, is still being talked about is to their advantage, no? Whether
Yes.
they will run or not. Ibig sabihin, they remain relevant. And I think gusto nila yon.
Yeah. Okay, maraming salamat po, Professor Jean Castro ng UP. Thank you, ma'am. The National Telecommunications Commission has ordered a probe into the emergency text alerts announcing the bid of former Senator Bongbong Marcos. During Marcos's filing for candidacy earlier today, some mobile users received a campaign ad from the country's emergency alert system, which is supposed to be used exclusively to warn about calamities. The Commission on Elections says while there is no penalty under electoral laws for the use of emergency channels for campaigning, it is likely that guidelines for the use of the emergency alert system prohibits this act. COMELEC spokesman James Jimenez also notes that the use of the emergency alert system for political propaganda is at best, and we quote, ill-advised. The NDRRMC denies links to the emergency alerts, saying they only sent out rainfall warnings today. The agency also assured the public that the warning systems are only being used for their mandated purpose.
These are the other big stories tonight. After ranking as the worst country to be in based on Bloomberg's resiliency report, the Philippines once again is at the bottom of the barrel, ending dead last in Nikkei's recovery ranking. The Labor Department thumbs down a proposal from the business sector to prohibit the unvaccinated from either returning to work or being hired. A new first is about to be made in cinema as a Russian crew attempts to make the first ever film to be shot in space. These big stories after the break.
Good evening. You're still watching The Big Story. I'm Ed Lingao.
And I'm Gretchen Ho. Several familiar names in the local scene dominated the sixth day of filing of certificates of candidacy.
As was the case during past elections, many of these names just switched from one position to another to maintain their hold in their city. JC Cosico with the story.
Mga batang Maynila, samahan po ninyo ako. Bigyan natin ang kapitolyo ng ating bansa ng isang pinuno na may puso ng isang ina. Pagmamalasakit ng isang doktora.
This was the call of Vice Mayor Honey Lacuna as she and Congressman Yul Servo formally launched their candidacies for Mayor and Vice Mayor of Manila. Apart from continuing projects initiated by Mayor Isko Moreno, Lacuna says she'll give her leadership a mother's touch should she win as Manila's first female mayor.
Pero wag po kayong magkakamali. Si Doktora Hani po ay matigas din. Singtigas din po ng kahit sinong lalaki.
Meanwhile, the Abalos family is aiming to keep the top elective posts in Mandaluyong City. After years of hiatus from politics, former Mandaluyong Mayor and COMELEC Chairman Benjamin Abalos Sr. is seeking a comeback in 2022. He filed COC for mayor, along with his daughter-in-law, Mayor Menchi Abalos, who is set to run for vice mayor. Abalos said he made a promise to his wife, who succumbed to COVID-19, that he'll return to public service.
Sabi ko sa kanya, I will spend the remaining best years of my life in the service of our people.
In Quezon City, Mayor Joy Belmonte and Vice Mayor Gian Soto filed their COCs for re-election. Congressman Alfred Vargas filed his COC for QC Councilor, while his brother, Councilor PM Vargas, will run for Congress in QC's 5th District. Also gunning for re-election in Pateros is Mayor Ike Ponce. Should Ponce win in the polls, this will be his third term in office. Over in Caloocan, Congressman Dave Gonzalo Malapitan will try to clinch his father's post as Caloocan City Mayor. Mayor Oca is set to run as 1st District Congressman. For News 5, JC Cosico, We Are One News.
Ahead of Vice President Leni Robredo's announcement tomorrow, the Akbayan party list has formally endorsed her for president in the 2022 elections. Bannered by the group's call, Akbayan si Leni, Akbayan first nominee Percy Sendanya said they are hoping that Robredo will heed the call of her supporters. Meanwhile, her office seems to be hinting at a possible run. Robredo spokesperson attorney Barry Gutierrez tweeted a video of Eraserheads singing its classic Huwag Kang Matakot. To recall, Eraserheads frontman Eli Buendia said the band would reunite if Robredo seeks the presidency.
In other news, labor groups and health experts are rejecting calls from the business sector to limit work opportunities for the unvaccinated. Their contention in Jenny Don's report.
As government tries to ramp up its vaccination efforts, several business groups have called on mobility restrictions against the unvaccinated. The groups want to take it a step further, prohibit the unvaccinated from returning to work, and worse, stop hiring those who refuse inoculation. For the Associated Labor Unions, this outright discriminatory, especially when vaccine supply is insufficient.
Papayag kami na magpairal ng sapilitang vaccination kapag ang bakuna natin ay sobra at madami.
The proposal, says Tanhusay, will only worsen joblessness in the country.
Ganon din sa mga negosyo. Maraming mga negosyo ang malulugi at maraming mga negosyo mapipilitang magsara kapag kakaunti ang mga customers nilang pumapasok dahil ang pinapapasok ay mga bakunado lamang. No? Babagsak din ang kanilang negosyo.
For the concerned doctors and citizens of the Philippines, the proposal is not scientifically sound. The group's president, Dr. Homer Lim, explained that based on current medical data, even the vaccinated can spread COVID-19, even if jobs do provide an additional layer of protection.
Whether or not nabakunahan ka hindi, yung viral load pag ikaw na-infect is the same. So those who are vaccinated are as infectious as those na hindi nagpabakuna.
Even the Labor Department shut down the proposal.
Guaranteed right kasi ang magtrabaho. Yan ay constitutional right. No? Walang pwedeng makahamper ng karapatan na yan.
The agency says a thorough study is still needed on the legal implications of imposing such restrictions on unvaccinated workers. For News 5, Jenny Dongon, We Are One News.
The Education Department is gearing up for the pilot run of face-to-face classes set to kick off on November 15. This will run for 2 months until the end of January next year. From there, officials will evaluate if it is safe to expand the program further. Class size will be limited to 12 for kindergarten, 16 for grades 1 to 3, and 20 for senior high school. Participating schools have been reduced from 59 to 59 from 100 previously after risk assessment.
After Bloomberg ranked the country to be the worst place to be in during the pandemic, the Philippines once again finds itself dead last, this time in Nikkei Asia's COVID-19 Recovery Index. Despite noting improvements in COVID infections, Nikkei ranked the country last out of 121 economies. It highlighted slow vaccine rollout at just 30% of the population and stay-at-home orders for minors and the elderly. Now joining the country at the bottom pack are other ASEAN economies like Laos and Vietnam. Indonesia saw its numbers improve. The Nikkei survey evaluates countries based on 3 metrics: infection management, vaccine rollout, and mobility. And using these criteria, 3 Middle Eastern countries took the top spots in the index. China, who is previously number 1, dropped in ratings due to stricter restrictions.
Adele says hello from the hiatus side. She just teased her first new music since her 2015 Grammy Award-winning album, 25. Easy on Me is set for release on October 15. Over at the streaming side, meanwhile, HBO Max just dropped the first trailer of House of Dragons. The much-awaited Game of Thrones prequel revolves around the reign of House Targaryen 200 years ago. The trailer showed glimpses of new characters and battles.
Dreams didn't make us kings. Dragons did.
And from a Western prequel to a Pinoy adaptation, Julius Villanueva's comic series El Arcangel is set to become an animated film. El Arcangel follows the story of a mambabarang who battles men and aswangs and the fictitious Barangay Masikap. The adaptation is made possible with a grant from the Film Development Council of the Philippines. Nick Garcia, We Are One News.
Time for another quick break. When we return, the local FDA has granted compassionate use permit for the use of Molnupiravir, the oral drug by Merck, now breaking in a lot of interest for its potential to cure COVID-19. And a film crew just made their way to space as Russia attempts to make the first film ever set outside Earth. The details after the break.
Good evening. You're still watching The Big Story. I'm Ed Lingao.
And I'm Gretchen Ho. Could the first oral COVID-19 drug be just around the corner?
Pharma giant Merck has released promising results on its experimental drug Molnupiravir. Ano naman pinahirapan ngayon? Mobile Journal's Pamela Vasquez has the story.
An experimental drug against COVID-19 has been generating a lot of buzz around the world. It's called Molnupiravir, developed by pharma giant Merck.
Sa mga hindi pa nabakunahan, kung magkaroon po sila ng COVID at kasama po sila dun sa at-risk na population, pag binigay mo itong Molnupiravir, yung tsansa na they will end up in the hospital goes down by half, by 50%.
Merck will apply for emergency use authorization in the US soon. If approved, Molnupiravir will become the first oral antiviral treatment for COVID-19. IATF advisor Dr. Edsel Salvaño says once an EUA has been granted in the US, the approval process here is usually quick. In fact, a clinical trial is already underway at the Lung Center of the Philippines.
In fact, as of yesterday, may 4 hospitals na nag-grant ng compassionate special permit for this drug ng FDA.
This early, countries like Australia and Thailand are already in talks to buy Molnupiravir in bulk. Meanwhile, the FDA has also approved more brands for the drug tocilizumab, which is used to treat severe COVID. It's in short supply globally, which has given birth to a black market here in the Philippines, with doses selling for as much as 10 times the retail price.
Naging tatlo na yung ating approved na mga brands. Nag-approve din natin isang brand nila, yung Roactemra, tapos meron po yung Temziva at yung Livson, na ngayong buwan na ito ay parating na rin daw.
The FDA also greenlit 2 more brands of baricitinib, which is an arthritis drug. The agency says it's put up a special lane to fast-track emergency use approvals for drugs for the treatment of COVID-19. Mobile journalist Pamela Vasquez, We Are One News.
For the big story in sports, in the PBA, Marshall Lassiter converted on a buzzer-beater follow-up shot to help the San Miguel Beermen beat the TNT Tropang Giga 98-96 to tie the series at 1 apiece. Down by 19 at one point in Game 2, San Miguel fought their way back, led by Terrence Romeo, who churned out 15 of his 26 points in the final quarter. And with the game on the line, Lassiter was there to clean up the mess, banking the ball off the board just before the final buzzer sounded. In the second game, the Magnolia Hotshots moved to 2-0 in their series after defeating the Meralco Bolts 92-78 in Game 2. It was a tightly contested game once again between both squads, but it was the Hotshots who delivered in the fourth to seal the victory. Over in volleyball, Choco Mucho earned some bragging rights over fellow Filipino team Rebisco after a 4-set victory in the classification round of the 2021 Asian Women's Club Volleyball Championship. Choco Mucho recovered from a meltdown in the first set to take the next 3 frames and the victory in comfortable fashion. The win pushed Choco Mucho to a battle for 5th place against Chetisu of Kazakhstan tomorrow. Rebisco, meanwhile, wrapped up its campaign at the 7th spot. In college sports, the return of face-to-face collegiate sports competition in the country may look gloomy, but optimism is growing day by day with the vaccination of collegiate athletes. In fact, the PLDT group has requested UAAP student athletes and coaches to receive their vaccines under the MVP group's vaccination program. On Wednesday, around 101 athletes and coaches were registered to receive their first dose at the Meralco Gym in Ortigas, Pasig.
This is the way to go, diba, that we are looking into, no, as part of the interventions where we can transition, diba, from the pandemic going into the normal. So this will give them protection, diba, to engage dun sa sports activities nila.
A string of celebrities made their 2022 bids official today. Dinamuli actor Bobby Andrews is dipping his toes into politics as he vies to be one of the 6 councilors in the 4th District of Quezon City.
Ito na yung pagkakataon ko para makapaglingkod.
His TGIS love team, Angelo De Leon, is also giving public service a shot. She'll run as councilor in Pasig 2nd District under Mayor Vico Soto's slate.
I was inspired by the good governance of Mayor Vico.
Back in Quezon City, Aiko Melendez filed for 5th District Councilor. This will be her 4th term should she win. Ormoc City Mayor Richard Gomez has also filed a COC to be the representative of the 4th District of Leyte, while wife incumbent Congresswoman Lucy Torres Gomez will be filing on Friday as Ormoc City's mayor. Meanwhile, siblings Robin and Romel Padilla took their oath as the newest members of the PDP Laban Kusi faction. Binoy and Romel have yet to file their COCs, but the former is said to be running for senator, while the latter aims to be a congressman in Nueva Ecija. For News 5, Laila Pangilinan, We Are One News.
Tom Cruise may have been the first actor to act near the top of the Burj Khalifa in Dubai, the world's tallest building. But he just got bested by Russia in another Mission Impossible to get even higher and film the world's first movie in space. A Russian actress and director are already at the International Space Station. Now for 12 days, they'll film segments of what is aptly titled as The Challenge. It tells the story of a doctor sent to space to save a cosmonaut's life. Actual cosmonauts will also star in the film.
First in, Soyuz Commander Anton Shkaplerov. Russian actress Yulia Peresild.
Congratulations on your successful arrival, and thank you all the entire ISS crew member for arranging for this video conference.
Teka lang, parang wala silang face mask, no?
Oo, tsaka paano sila, may dalang makeup artist kaya mga yan?
Oo nga eh. Ay, sa ano pala yun? Sa space.
Actually, ang question ko is where do they pay their taxes when the movie comes out?
Ayun pala.
Who has
Oo.
internal revenue jurisdiction?
Oo nga,
Will it
no?
be the country they're over when they're filming? Or?
Ang dami natin tanong, no? Pinahirapan natin yung buhay nila. Pero siguro mas mahirap kung pasmado ka doon, no?
Bakit naman?
Yung camera, gumagalaw pa yung ano. Okay, wag na.
Okay. It's a Wednesday, so bigyan na natin.
That wraps up today's big story. Catch us again tomorrow at 8 p.m. on Signal Channels 8 and 250.
Please like our Facebook page, One News. For more in-depth analysis, visit our webpage, onenews.ph. Mask on.
Wash hands.
And stay safe, Philippines. On behalf of Robbie Lampay, I'm Edwin Gao.
And I'm Gretchen Hall. We are One News. Have a good evening.